Hey friends, really excited to be sharing this video with you today. I was able to be joined by Chris Schwartz-Edmisten. Many of you probably follow his YouTube channel and check out his website as well. And all we talk about today are attribute selectors within Squarespace. Attribute selectors are kind of the final boss of learning targeting within CSS generally. And we talk specifically about targeting, of course, within Squarespace today. So Chris is going to go through a couple examples. I'm going to go through a couple examples. We'll be customizing some things and teaching you along the way. We'll be jumping all in the web inspector. It's going to be a blast. So I hope you're able to learn something from this video. And I just want to apologize up front. The video, some of the recording gets a little grainy throughout just because of the way we were recording it. But thank you for your understanding, and we'll see you in there. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of data selectors, attribute selectors. There's a lot going on here with CSS, and I know when I first started to jump into CSS, this was an area, once I saw that you could target anything with whatever is in the element with all these attributes, it really kind of unlocked a lot for me. And you use attributes for targeting specific, you use it for like specific targeting and stuff in Squarespace. Would love to see your process for doing that and what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Here, let me share my screen.
Please.
So people are probably familiar with data section IDs, attribute selectors, I should say, because they target the data section ID to target specific sections. So this probably looks pretty familiar. So data-section-ID, and then there's this long string of numbers and letters.
Random,
So this is like a unique identifier for this section here that I'm hovering over. So even if you use the block identifier extension, so that's exactly what we're targeting, that data section ID. And so it's awesome. It lets you target a specific section. And so attribute selectors are when you can target different elements. So for example, for this data section ID, that's an attribute selector. And to use an attribute selector, we use brackets like this. Yep. So in CSS, that's how you can target a data attribute. So the way that I use data attributes is particularly for auto layout sections, they're really handy because you can create reusable CSS. So one property that I use data attribute selectors on, if I scroll down to my carousel layout here, if I go to edit content, I can toggle on the title. And then there's a setting, if I go to size and space, it's the space below section title. So whatever value we set this to actually shows up in the HTML. So I'll set it to 58 pixels, for example, which is like just a pretty random setting. I probably won't have, any other section have a space below section title of 58 pixels.
Right, that's pretty specific.
So, yeah, exactly. So I'm using this like editor property to influence the HTML structure of the page. And so now I can use a attribute selector. So if I right click on the section and click inspect, we can find the user items list element, and then the data space below section title value has a value of 58.
Right.
So now I could use this data attribute here. I'm going to select it and copy it into my custom CSS window. And now we target attributes with brackets. And so now I have a very specific selector here for this section. But the great thing about this, if I do any CSS here, so maybe let's make our list items even taller. So I'll go inside of the carousel. We have the gutter, then we have the slideshow holder. We have the revealer.
So much HTML.
I know. We have the slides, and then finally we get the items. So each of the items gets a class of list item. So within this section, I'm going to target the list items, and we'll just do like a min height of, let's say, 500 pixels.
It didn't put the item on the list.
Right. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
List item. Okay, so now these items are even taller. I've made a CSS change. But the great thing is, so I don't necessarily need a title on this section. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the title. So I'm going to inspect the title, and I'll go to the list section title, and I want to remove this whole element. So I'll copy that class, and I'm going to do some nesting here since we can take advantage of nesting in the Squarespace CSS panel. it uses the less preprocessor, so we can do this sort of thing. So now within this element here, we're going to target the title, and we can give it a display of none. But the benefit of doing it this way compared to targeting this section's unique data section ID is that if I've set up some styles, and now this can be like a reusable component on the site. So if I save this as a saved section, I can use this anywhere else on the site. If I duplicate this section, this new duplicate, which has a different data section ID than the original, so this CSS ordinarily would not have copied over, but because it uses that attribute of the space below section title, we can create like reusable CSS, which is awesome.
Yeah, this is excellent. So this is a way to create reusable components without using the specific data section ID, just with data attributes. Right.
Exactly. And this type of method, like you can use attribute selectors on a bunch of different type of components. So here I've used it for the data space below section title, but if you just look through, any element on Squarespace, like these sorts of attribute selectors that can be targeted are everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I could do reusable CSS based on, whether the data show adjacent sides is set to true or to false. So these can be used everywhere.
Yeah, they're all over the place. And you showed me, like right before we jumped on, you were showing me another way to do this with expanding the height of the first item in your column, which is hard. It sounds like a simple thing. You could just use like first child or nth of type or something. But you can't, and you found a way to do it using just the style selector.
Yeah, so if I drill down back to the list items again, so basically these elements, like I had a client who wanted this first one to be taller than the rest of them. But the problem is, like, I can't just target this first item. I want to target the item that's in the first column. So if I slide it over, this item is the first item, but it's not the one that I want to be tall. This one is now the one that I want to be tall.
Can you write some CSS for that just so we can visually see like where the problem is on that?
Totally. Yeah, good idea. So I'll target the list item. That's the first child. And I'm going to use clip path. So this is how I'm going to be sort of animating the height of the item to be different than the others. So basically I want all of my boxes, like this represents the original like size of the element, and we can use clip path to kind of like change the shape. We're like clipping the shape into something else that we want. And you can see you can do like any type of shape that you can think of, but here I just want a square that's like not as tall.
This is an excellent tool. We'll link to it down below in the show notes, but I've used this a number of times. This is an excellent tool.
Yeah, it's awesome. So for here, we want our list items that aren't that like active item to be smaller. So there you can see I've, like clipped the other items. Of course, you would want to be like a little bit more accurate here. So we can do 10.
That's pretty cool. Even like the angled, I don't know. That's pretty sweet. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So like, let's say we want the first child to not, be cropped. We want it to be bigger. So then we could do, let's see, that would be 0. And this one would be 0. And then our 90s will be 100.
These clip paths, the polygon formula or the function just allows you to create different points of your element without it's going to clip around. So that's what the 4 different parameters in the polygon calc function is.
Yeah. So now we have our first element that has the tall box, but the problem is when we scroll it away, we want the first column item to be the tall box. So the way that we can do that, instead of first child, what we want to do is we want to select the element whose style has a transform translate 3D equal to 0 pixels. So transform translate 3D, as translates things it can be in any direction. And when it has translate 3D, this represents the X, the horizontal axis, the vertical axis, and then like the depth forward and back axis.
Yeah.
So we're just translating along the first, the X axis. So when you slide it, so this one now has a negative pixel value because we've slid it to the left.
Right.
But this first column item now has a transform translate 3D of 0 pixels. So the first item in the column will always have a transform translate 3D of 0 pixels. So that's the way that we can select this element. So you can also use the attribute selector to select items when their style contains like a specific setting. In this case, we want to target an element whose style contains translate 3D.
Parentheses.
What are these called?
Yeah, parentheses. It's amazing how much your mind just forgets when you're recording video. It's wild.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, parentheses and then 0 pixels. So interestingly, in some browsers, I've noticed some will have the spaces and some won't. So that's why I don't feel the need to say it contains this whole like chunk here.
Yeah.
All we really care about is that the first X value has 3D quotation mark 0 pixels.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm going to target this element. Not quotation mark, parentheses. Oh my gosh. Whoops. It's hard to target. So here we go. Translate 3D, except we want it to be 0. So I'm going to target the first item. And let me refresh my screen here. I accidentally, I think, removed that element from the page when I clicked and dragged.
Yeah. Done that a number of times when you click and drag and then it's like, oh, we just want to remove this from the DOM.
Yeah. All right. So now we're back. So I'll go to custom CSS, and so for this list item, we want to target it. So I'm going to open up some brackets because we're doing an attribute selector. And so we want to target it when the style contains, and the way that you can do that is with the star selector, and it comes before the equal sign. So we're saying when it contains something specific. So in this case, we want to do a translate 3D, and when it contains 0 pixels. And then we don't need like anything after this. So this is now our attribute that we're targeting based on this style. And so now we have the first item in the column that gets the effect. And then if I wanted this to be a little bit smoother, then I'll do a transition clip path, and I'll do like 0.5 seconds, and we'll do an ease. So now it'll be a little bit.
That's sweet.
Throw an important on there. There we go. And then the cool thing is, so we could do the same thing. Like let's say we wanted the middle one to be the one that is bigger and animated. What we could do the immediate sibling selector. So like I could do, list item. So I'm targeting the immediate element that has a list item class. And so now it's the middle one that gets bigger.
Oh, that's excellent. That's so well thought out. I love this. That's really cool.
And it's just super powerful. Like these things exist all over Squarespace. They're just, attributes waiting to be selected. So it's a really, really powerful way to do it. Then of course you would want to come in here to the items and, center this content. I won't get into that because we're just talking about attribute selectors, but yeah, so that's a way that you could do this sort of design. And I know that you had mentioned you have some ways that you use attribute selectors for links as well.
Yeah, a couple different things. And this is what I love about attribute selectors is they're just so powerful. You can do so much with them. Like you just showed, there were 2 different ways we just used it there. Share my screen. Okay, so what you just showed, there was 2 ways you used it. You targeted the data attribute, and then you targeted a portion of the style attribute. So these little brackets that we use can be anything in the HTML, these little square brackets. So anything that is within the element is what we're targeting. So here is one example, one way I've done this for targeting anything that's like a download link. So like if you've created a PDF on your website or a downloadable image like a JPEG or a PNG, the href of that element is going to end with .pdf or .png. So if we look at the web inspector here, we can zoom in. I've added a download to this link right here, and it ends in .png. So this is what you were doing, is you were targeting the data attribute right here, but really anything within our elements can be targeted. Anything that's in there. So anything that's specific we want to look at. So I'm going to look for any link on my website that has an href that contains the string .png or .pdf or .jpeg. So that's what I've done right over here. We've just targeted any link on our website that ends in one of those. And then once we've done that, we can, I'm going to use one of your little snippets over here to add a little icon right here. So I'm just going to copy this. I'll link to this in the show notes, but this is a great way to add icons in CSS. So by default, this is what you have, is just the arrow, but we can switch out that icon. So right up here, we have in SVG, a data URI of an SVG. And this is the way you can add an icon in using just CSS. So I use hero icons. I'm not sure if there's like your go-to image or icon library. What is your go-to one?
I use Icon Monster a lot.
Icon Monster. Okay, is that one free?
It is, yeah, and it doesn't require any like attribution or anything like that.
That's really nice. This one's similar. Hero icons. It's not a big library, but all of them are totally free, and they're really nice. So I'm just going to type in download. I'm going to grab this one, data, and just say copy SVG. And then this is how you can turn an icon. That's just the HTML that I just copied, but we want to use it in CSS, and you can't use HTML in CSS, in the custom CSS area. It's not going to work. So just type in SVG to data URI into Google, and this first one, it's a wonderful tool. You just paste it in right there, and then it just gives you what you can use in your CSS. So this is what we have right here. Here's just the data URI. So I'm just going to hit copy on that. Go back to our website, and I'm just going to paste it in because we need to extract a little bit from it. So this is the background image, but all I need is just everything within the double quotes right there. So I'm going to copy all of that, copy it on my keyboard, then delete it. And then I'm going to replace what we have in between double quotes with our SVG variable right there. Paste it in. And now we have a nice little download icon. So now anytime you add a download to your website in a link, if you just add, just edit, y'all know how to add download icons. If you just add a file, as long as it ends in .pdf, .jpeg, .png, whatever it is, you can add, it'll add a little download icon. So this is another way that I've used it. It's very helpful to add just like little icons and stuff to your website. And then lastly, in a similar vein, we can target specific links in our header up here as well. So let's look at the HTML of a header link right here. So any link that has href of services. So what I'm going to do is make sure it's a header nav item because I don't want it anywhere on my website. So I target my main nav, header nav item, if we have an href of services, an anchor link with an href equal to services right there. That we're always going to make the color of that red or something, whatever we want it to be. And this way you can target specific links. And you could also do like inth of type 1 or inth of type 2, whatever you want to use here. But what I like about this method is it's so easy to hand off to a client because they might say, okay, I do want my services to be highlighted, or I want to turn that button into like a secondary, but like a bigger, more button looking thing. Maybe not just color, maybe add a background and all that stuff. And it allows them to move it around, and it's still going to be that whatever styles because you're not using the nth of type where it like has to be the first one or something.
I love that. And you could use this also to like have a phone number in your services and then add like a little phone icon. You can kind of combine the two that you just showed and have a little like telephone icon whenever it starts with like tel colon and then
Love
phone
that.
number.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we can just quickly do that. We'll add a phone number 123456789 We'll just do that. And this is the nice thing. If we look at the HTML of links, they all start with tel. So we can do that same kind of thing. We'll go to our CSS area. I don't know if you use this to navigate now, the / and just search.
Yeah, all the time. It's so much
It's
faster.
so much faster to be doing that. I know.
Yeah.
So we'll just add another one just to keep it simple. But as long as our href has tel : it's going to add our little icon. And obviously you'd want to do like a phone icon or something. So you just want to duplicate this and change out the URL. But yeah, like you said, a lot of different cool ways. Selectors, these attribute selectors, once you kind of like get the hang of them and understand, oh, I can do anything. I can search for a specific part of a string within an attribute. Becomes super, super powerful on your website.
Yeah, I love that. And we even sort of like dived into variables a little bit. Like we didn't mention it in this video, but variables can be super powerful too because we're using the less preprocessor in the Squarespace CSS window.
Yeah.
So the nice thing is, because for the WebKit mask image, we have to include like the prefixed version and the normal version. If you just save that data URI that you mentioned in the variable, then you can just apply the variable in both instances and you don't have to include all of that information twice.
Duplicate. Yeah, that would be a total mess. Yeah. This is such a great. I've been looking for a way to add icons that sort of match the color of whatever you're using for so long. I'm very glad I have found this. All right, so hope that was helpful. A lot of different ways you can be using data attributes, attribute selectors, target specific things on your Squarespace website, make changes, a lot more customizable. So Chris, thank you for joining. I'm going to put a link to your channel down below and all the resources that we had. Thanks for joining, man.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me.